The galaxy had known peace for 300 cycles. 300 rotations around the galactic core where the great civilizations of the harmonious collective had spread their influence across 10,000 worlds, establishing trade routes that spanned light years, diplomatic accords that had ended millennia of conflict, and a universal doctrine of measured progress that kept the darkness of war at bay. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline cities that sang in frequencies beyond most species' hearing. The Morpheus Syndicate, whose bioengineered vessels grew rather than were built, pulsing through space like living organisms. The Veltaxi Confederacy, masters of quantum mechanics, who could fold space itself to their will. The Etherian Commonwealth, whose telepathic networks connected minds across star systems in perfect harmony. All of them sophisticated. All of them evolved beyond the primitive concepts of violence and territorial expansion. All of them naive. Admiral Crix, the law of the Zephyrian fleet, gazed through the viewport of her flagship, the Resonance, as it drifted in the outer rim of what the galaxy's databases had recently catalogued as the Sol system. Her 4 arms moved in practiced harmony across the crystalline control surfaces, each gesture producing a different harmonic frequency that her crew interpreted as easily as spoken language. Preliminary scans complete, Admiral reported Commander Velnoth, his own crystalline exoskeleton pulsing with soft blue light. The 3rd planet shows signs of advanced civilization. Electromagnetic signatures, industrial pollutants, primitive nuclear technology. Crixthala's primary eyes focused on the blue-green world rotating slowly beneath them, while her secondary eyes monitored the tactical displays. Any response to our presence? Negative. Their detection capabilities appear limited. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission from the Collective Council. Crixthala accepted the connection, and the familiar form of High Counselor Enixvera materialized in the holographic field before her. A being whose species had transcended physical form millennia ago, now existing as pure thought given luminous shape. Admiral, the High Counselor's voice resonated directly in their minds. Have you established contact protocols? The inhabitants appear to be pre-contact, Counselor. Standard xenological surveys suggest they are several centuries away from achieving faster-than-light capability. Excellent. Begin the integration protocol. These humans will make a fine addition to our collective once properly educated. Crixthala felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite identify, a discordant note in the harmony of her thoughts. Counselor, preliminary cultural analysis suggests these beings may be resistant to integration. Their historical records show persistent patterns of territorial conflict. All primitive species exhibit such behaviors, Admiral. Once exposed to our superior wisdom and technology, they will see the folly of their ways, proceed with Phase 1 orbital positioning, and cultural observation. We'll have them ready for formal contact within a solar cycle. The transmission ended, leaving Crixthala alone with her growing unease. She had overseen 17 successful integrations during her career, each time watching as primitive civilizations evolved from conflict to harmony under the collective's guidance. But something felt different about this world. Yes, Admiral. Far below, on the surface of the world they called Earth, Dr. James Hartwell was having what he would later describe as the worst day of his life. The research facility hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains had been his life's work. A joint project between 17 nations dedicated to the study of what governments euphemistically called anomalous phenomena. In reality, it was humanity's first serious attempt to understand that they were not alone in the universe. Dr. Hartwell, the voice belonged to Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Cross, the facility's military liaison, as she burst through the heavy security doors of the main laboratory. We've got massive electromagnetic anomalies registering on every satellite in the Northern Hemisphere. Hartwell looked up from the quantum resonance array he'd been calibrating, a device that could theoretically detect faster-than-light disturbances in space-time. The readings on his screen made his blood run cold. Amanda, we need to evacuate the facility. Now. What are you talking about? These readings, they're not natural. Someone's here. The lights flickered, and every piece of electronic equipment in the laboratory went silent for exactly 3.7 seconds. When they returned, a new signal appeared on Hartwell's monitors. Organized, systematic, probing. They were being scanned. 2,000 miles away, in a cramped apartment in Detroit, former Navy SEAL David Kane was trying to forget the war in Afghanistan by losing himself in the rhythmic precision of knife throwing. The basement of his building had become his sanctuary: 4 walls, a collection of targets, and the whisper of steel cutting through air. He drew the knife from his belt, a standard military-issue combat blade he'd carried through 3 deployments, and let his mind empty as he measured distance, angle, rotation. The blade left his hand in a perfect arc, spinning end over end until it buried itself in the center of the target with a satisfying thunk. Kane had no way of knowing that 3 miles above him, a Zephyrian observation drone had just recorded what it classified as anomalous precision behavior in its behavioral analysis files. The AI systems analyzing the footage flagged it for immediate review by xenobiological specialists. Her assistant, a young researcher named Kixelero, leaned closer to the display. Perhaps it's recreational behavior? Many species develop non-essential skills for entertainment purposes. No, Silithani's tone grew thoughtful. Look at the precision, the consistency. This individual has transformed lethal skills into muscle memory. Even in a peaceful environment, he maintains combat readiness. She marked the file for closer observation and moved to the next recording. A human military training facility where soldiers practiced what the database identified as close-quarters combat scenarios. Her research appendages began to twitch with nervous energy as she watched humans systematically learning to kill with efficiency and grace. Keys, Loro. Access the historical databases. How many wars has this species fought in the last 1,000 cycles? The younger researcher's carapace shifted to a pale yellow, a sign of distress among her people. Dr. Siltani. The number is substantial. 14,732 documented conflicts, ranging from tribal disputes to planetary-scale warfare. The largest conflict ended only 80 cycles ago and resulted in the deaths of approximately 55 million individuals. Silithani felt her own carapace begin to shift toward yellow. 55 million? That's more than the total population of most collective worlds. Yes, Doctor. And according to these records, it wasn't even their largest war. Back on Earth, David Kane had no idea that his evening knife practice had just changed the course of galactic history. He retrieved his blade from the target, weighing it in his hand as he considered whether to continue training or finally try to sleep. The nightmares had been getting worse lately. Fragments of memory from Kandahar, the weight of his rifle, the face of the Taliban fighter who'd almost killed him with a curved blade before Kane's own knife found its mark. He was raising the knife for another throw when every light in the building went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in red light, but in that moment of absolute darkness, Kane's combat instincts had taken over. Without conscious thought, he dropped into a defensive crouch, the knife shifting in his grip from throwing position to close combat ready. Admiral Krikstella was reviewing the day's observations when the priority alert reached her command center. The analysis from Dr. Silthani's team appeared on her primary display, along with hundreds of similar recordings from across the planet. Commander Velnoth convened the senior staff. We need to reassess our approach to this species. Admiral, surely you're not suggesting these primitives pose any significant... Commander! Krikstella's voice carried harmonics that made her subordinate's crystalline form resonate with submission. When was the last time you saw a member of the collective practice combat techniques? Well, Admiral, combat techniques have been obsolete for centuries. The harmony accords specific... Exactly. We've forgotten how to fight because we've had no need to fight. These humans... She gestured toward the displays showing endless footage of human military training, sporting competitions that simulated combat, even children's games that involved strategic thinking and quick reflexes. They've never stopped. The senior staff materialized as holograms around the conference chamber, representatives from each ship in the small fleet, their forms flickering with the nervous energy of beings confronting something outside their experience. The integration protocol assumes a cooperative species. Krikstella began without preamble. Our standard approach involves demonstrating our technological superiority, offering membership in the collective in exchange for abandoning primitive behaviors like territorial expansion and resource competition. It has worked successfully on 17 worlds. Dr. Siltani's image nodded agreement. The psychological profile is always similar, Once a species recognizes the benefits of collective harmony over individual conflict, they eagerly embrace integration. But these humans may be different, Krixathala continued. Their entire social structure appears built around conflict resolution through controlled violence. Even their entertainment simulates warfare. It was Captain Trixalan of the research vessel who raised the question that would haunt them all. But what if they refuse integration? The chamber fell silent except for the harmonic hum of the ship's engines. The Harmony Accords have never encountered species that refuse integration, Admiral Krixthala said finally. Our contingency protocols assume compliance after proper education, and if education fails, another long silence. Then we proceed to Phase 2 of the integration protocol. Krixtala's voice carried notes of distaste. We eliminate the leadership structure and guide the remaining population toward enlightenment. None of them spoke the obvious corollary that Phase 2 had never been used because no species had ever been foolish enough to refuse the obvious benefits of joining the galactic community. As the meeting adjourned and the holograms faded, Krixella found herself staring again at the recordings of the human with the knife. There was something about the fluid efficiency of his movements, the instant transition from peace to war readiness, that made her crystalline structure resonate with frequencies she'd never felt before. Fear. On Earth, David Kane finally gave up on sleep and returned to his targets. The power outage had unsettled him too much like the moments before an ambush, when the enemy cut communications before attacking. He threw knife after knife in the red-tinged emergency lighting, each blade finding its mark with mechanical precision. He had no way of knowing that with every throw, with every perfect rotation and solid impact, he was teaching an alien civilization that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The knife left his hand one final time, spinning through the crimson air. And in the depths of space, Admiral Krixthala watched her worst fears taking shape as she realized that Earth's most dangerous weapon wasn't their primitive nuclear arsenal or their crude projectile weaponry. It was the fact that after millennia of warfare, humans had never forgotten how to fight. The first mistake the Harmonious Collective made was underestimating human curiosity. Dr. James Hartwell had spent 48 hours straight analyzing the electromagnetic signatures that had cascaded through Earth's detection networks, and what he'd found made him question everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. The patterns are too regular to be natural phenomena, he explained to the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, held via encrypted quantum communication networks in an undisclosed location beneath Switzerland. He paused, knowing that once he spoke the words there would be no going back. Suggest what, Doctor? The voice belonged to General Patricia Hayes, Supreme Allied Commander of Earth's newly formed Integrated Defense Network. Active surveillance by an intelligence with technology at least 3 centuries beyond our current capabilities. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the chamber's climate control systems. 18 world leaders stared at Hartwell through holographic projections, their faces reflecting the same mixture of disbelief and dawning terror. Are you telling us, said Premier Luwei of the Pacific Coalition, that we are currently under observation by an alien civilization? Not just observation, Premier. Analysis. They're studying us like specimens in a laboratory. 3 miles above the assembly, Admiral Krixthala was conducting her own emergency session aboard the Resonance. The holographic forms of the Collective Council surrounded her command platform, their luminous shapes pulsing with agitated energy. Admiral High Counselor Nix Vera's telepathic voice carried undertones of displeasure. Your reports grow increasingly alarmist. These humans cannot possibly pose a threat to the Collective. Counselor, with respect, our behavioral analysis suggests otherwise. Human social structures are fundamentally different from any species we've encountered. They don't seek harmony. They thrive on controlled conflict. Dr. Siltani's research data materialized in the center of the council chamber. Thousands of hours of surveillance footage showing humans engaged in activities that the Collective found deeply disturbing. Military training exercises, where soldiers practiced killing with clinical efficiency. Sporting competitions that simulated warfare. Entertainment media that glorified individual violence over collective harmony. Look at this. Siltani highlighted a recording of a human martial arts tournament. They compete to see who can most efficiently disable an opponent. For recreation. Counselor Thaxamara, representing the Morpheus Syndicate, shifted her bioluminescent form to skeptical green. Surely this is merely vestigial behavior from their primitive past. Once properly educated, they will abandon such barbarism. I thought so too, Krixthala replied. Until we analyze their response to our scanning activities. They know we're here, Admiral Krixthala said simply. And they're getting ready to fight. In the depths of the Rocky Mountains, David Kane was having a very different kind of emergency meeting. Gentlemen, General Hayes addressed the assembled group of military specialists, intelligence analysts, and what the files euphemistically labeled irregular warfare consultants. 72 hours ago, Dr. Hartwell's team confirmed what we've suspected for months. We are not alone, and our new neighbors appear to be taking a very close interest in human affairs. Kane sat in the back of the briefing room, still uncomfortable with being recalled to active duty after 3 years of retirement. The nightmare of Afghanistan felt like a lifetime ago. But the skills remained sharp, honed by nightly practice sessions with blade and precision shooting. The President has authorized Operation Deep Strike. Hayes continued. If these entities prove hostile, we need options beyond conventional warfare. Mr. Kane, your expertise in asymmetric combat operations makes you uniquely qualified to lead the unconventional response team. Kane studied the sensor data projected on the briefing room screen. Electromagnetic signatures that painted a picture of technology so advanced it might as well be magic. General, with respect, if these beings have the capability to travel between stars, what exactly do you expect a few dozen special operations soldiers to accomplish? What Americans have always accomplished when facing superior odds, Hayes replied. We improvise, we adapt, we overcome. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Kane felt something awakening in his chest that had been dormant since his last deployment. The quiet, cold fire that turned ordinary soldiers into predators. What's the timeline? 48 hours until we initiate first contact protocols. If negotiations fail, Hayes let the implication hang unspoken. Kane nodded slowly. I'll need 12 men, volunteers only, and complete operational autonomy. Done. What neither Kane nor Hayes could know was that their conversation was being recorded by surveillance devices that operated on principles of quantum mechanics. Their scientists wouldn't discover for another century. Dr. Silton he reviewed the recordings with growing unease. They're forming specialized combat units in response to our presence. Look at this individual. Kane's image appeared on her screen. His psychological profile suggests extensive experience with what they term asymmetric warfare. Meaning, asked Cox. Meaning he specializes in making superior forces pay unacceptable costs for victory. Admiral Krixthala was reaching the same conclusions aboard the Resonance. The human response to their presence had been swift, organized, and demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that suggested these primitives might be more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Status report, Commander Velnoth. Admiral, orbital surveillance shows increased electromagnetic activity around military installations, population centers, and what appear to be previously unknown underground facilities. They're mobilizing. For what? They can't seriously intend to fight us. Unknown, Admiral, but their behavior patterns suggest they're treating our presence as a prelude to invasion. Krixthala felt her crystalline structure resonate with those unfamiliar frequencies again. The harmonic signature of fear mixed with something else. Respect. These humans were preparing to fight a war they couldn't possibly win with a determination that spoke to something fundamental in their nature. Open a channel to Earth's primary communication networks, she ordered. It's time to make contact. The first official communication between humanity and the Harmonious Collective came at 1437 Greenwich Mean Time on a Tuesday afternoon that would be remembered as either the beginning of a new golden age or the last day of human independence. Dr. Hartwell was in his laboratory when every electronic device on Earth simultaneously displayed the same message, translated into each local language with perfect linguistic precision. Greetings, people of Earth. We are the Harmonious Collective, representatives of the galactic community. We come in peace to offer your species membership in a civilization spanning 10,000 worlds. Prepare your leadership for contact. Resistance to this offer would be unfortunate. The message repeated for exactly 17 minutes, then vanished. leaving behind only the stunned silence of a species that had just learned it was no longer alone in the universe. In the depths of the mountain facility, General Hayes stared at the blank screens that moments before had carried humanity's first message from the stars. "Well," she said to no one in particular, "that could have gone better." David Kane was cleaning his knives when the message appeared on his basement television. He read it twice, letting the implications sink in, then methodically returned each blade to its designated place in his equipment kit. The phrasing was polite, diplomatic, reasonable. It was also a threat wrapped in velvet: join us willingly, or face the consequences. Kane had heard similar offers before in darker places and under different circumstances. They always ended the same way, with violence. He was reaching for his phone to contact General Hayes when the second message appeared, this one directed specifically to military command frequencies. Kane stared at the screen for a long moment, then dialed Hayes's secure line. "General, it's Kane. I saw the message. What's your assessment?" "They're scared." "Scared?" "Kane, they're offering us membership in a galactic civilization." "How is that?" "Ma'am, if they were confident in their ability to control us, they wouldn't need to threaten us." The message wasn't a diplomatic opening, it was a psychological operation designed to make us surrender before we realize we have other options. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "What are you recommending?" Kane looked at his reflection in the blade of his combat knife, seeing the face of a man who had spent his life learning that sometimes the only way to achieve peace was to prepare for war. "That we show them exactly why humans have survived every extinction event this planet has thrown at us." Kane: "General, with respect, they made one critical error in their assessment of humanity." "Which is?" "They assumed we'd be grateful for the opportunity to surrender." The line went quiet, and Kane could almost hear the wheels turning in Hayes's mind as she weighed the impossible decision: accept absorption into an alien collective or fight a war against beings with technology centuries beyond human capability. 48 hours until the president's response is due," Hayes said finally. 48 hours, Kane confirmed, then added, "General, tell the president that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds." As the line went dead, Kane returned to his knife practice, with the methodical precision of a man preparing for war. Each throw was perfect, each rotation calculated, each impact driving steel deeper into the target. 3 miles above, Zephyrian sensors recorded every movement, every gesture, every demonstration of lethal skill. In the depths of space, alien minds struggled to understand a species that responded to overwhelming technological superiority not with submission, but with quiet preparation for battle. Admiral Crix Thala reviewed the surveillance data with growing unease. The humans weren't backing down. If anything, their military preparations were accelerating, driven by the same incomprehensible stubbornness that had allowed them to survive millions of years of evolution on a planet that seemed determined to kill everything living on it. "Commander," she said softly, "prepare the fleet for Phase 2 protocols." Crix Thala watched as David Kane's knife spun through the air in a perfect arc, burying itself in the exact center of its target. The human retrieved the blade with a canonical movement, checked its edge with professional care, and prepared for another throw. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying harmonics she'd never heard before, "I'm beginning to think we have no idea what these humans are capable of." The knife left Kane's hand one more time, spinning end over end through the dim light of the basement, its steel surface reflecting the cold fire of a man who had never learned to surrender. And in the depths of space, an alien civilization began to realize that some species were too dangerous to integrate, and too stubborn to destroy easily. The final message from Earth to the Harmonious Collective was delivered at exactly 08:00 Greenwich Mean Time, 48 hours after first contact, broadcast on every frequency that human technology could produce, and transmitted with enough electromagnetic power to be heard across half the galaxy. President Maria Santos spoke for all humanity, her words carrying the weight of 8 billion souls and the accumulated defiance of a species that had never learned when to quit. "To the Harmonious Collective, we thank you for your offer of membership in your galactic civilization. After careful consideration, our answer is no. Earth will remain independent, sovereign, and free. If you cannot accept this decision, then you will discover why humans have survived every challenge this universe has placed before us. We do not seek war, but we will not surrender our freedom to avoid it. The choice is yours. The transmission ended, leaving behind a silence that stretched across star systems. Admiral Krixthala stood in the command center of the resonance, her crystalline form resonating with frequencies that spoke of disbelief and dawning horror. Around her, the senior staff's luminous bodies flickered with shades of amber and red, colors that hadn't been seen in collective space for 3 centuries. "They refused," Commander Velenas said, his voice carrying harmonics of shock. "They actually refused integration." Dr. Seltani's image materialized from the research vessel. Her carapace shifted to deep crimson, a color that among her species indicated existential fear. "Admiral, this is unprecedented. No species in collective history has chosen conflict over harmony." High Counselor Litmafir's telepathic presence filled the command center with waves of cold authority. "Admiral Krixathala, you are authorized to proceed with Phase 2 protocols. Eliminate human leadership structures and prepare the population for mandatory integration." Krixthala's primary eyes focused on Earth rotating beneath them, a blue-green world that had just declared war on the combined might of 10,000 civilizations. "Counselor, our analysis suggests that Phase 2 protocols may not achieve desired results. Human social structures are decentralized, their leadership redundant. Eliminating their governments may only strengthen their resistance." "Impossible. All species require hierarchical control structures. Remove the leaders and the population becomes compliant." "Not these humans, Counselor. They have something our models cannot account for." "Which is?" Admiral Krixthala looked again at the surveillance feeds, showing military preparations across Earth, soldiers training with grim determination, civilians volunteering for evacuation duties. "They have hope." The fleet took positions around Earth like the fingers of a closing fist. 12 capital ships, each one capable of sterilizing continents, supported by hundreds of smaller vessels equipped with weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level. Against them, humanity could field projectile weapons, primitive nuclear devices, and electronic systems that were barely more sophisticated than the tools used to build the pyramids. David Kane stood in the briefing room carved from solid rock 2 miles beneath the Colorado mountains, looking at tactical displays that painted a picture of humanity's impending extinction. 12 men sat around the conference table, volunteers all, each one a veteran of conflicts where victory had seemed impossible until it wasn't. "Gentlemen," Kane began, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had stared death in the face and learned to make it blink first. "The odds against us are approximately 1 trillion to 1. Sergeant Major Michael Torres, veteran of the Amazon War, raised his hand. "Rules of engagement? There are no rules. We're not fighting an enemy that recognizes the Geneva Convention. None. Use whatever works." Captain Alexander Petrov, whose service record from the Siberian insurgency was still classified, asked the question they were all thinking: "What's the mission objective?" Kane was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Gentlemen, our job isn't to win this war. Our job is to make the enemy regret starting it." The first phase of the collective's assault began at dawn, with what military historians would later call the soft strike protocol, targeted electromagnetic pulses designed to disable Earth's communication networks and create panic among the population. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: cut off the planet's ability to coordinate resistance, demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, then offer surrender terms that would seem reasonable compared to extinction. What the collective hadn't anticipated was that humans had been preparing for exactly this scenario since the first electronic warfare exercises of World War II. Dr. Hartwell's quantum detection arrays registered the incoming pulse microseconds before it struck, triggering automated responses that shunted critical systems to hardened backup networks buried so deep underground that they predated the invention of electronic warfare. Instead of panic and confusion, the collective's demonstration of power was met with coordinated retaliation. Every nuclear submarine on Earth launched simultaneously. Intercontinental ballistic missiles rose from silos that weren't supposed to exist, carrying warheads that had been extensively modified by teams of physicists working with the desperate creativity of a species facing extinction. The primitive atomic weapons couldn't penetrate the collective's energy shields, but they weren't intended to. Each warhead detonated at precisely calculated altitudes, creating cascading electromagnetic interference that turned Earth's upper atmosphere into a howling storm of radiation that made accurate targeting impossible. Admiral Krikstella watched her tactical displays dissolve into chaos as her weapons systems struggled to lock onto targets through the electromagnetic tempest humanity had just created around their planet. "Impressive," Commander Velnoth admitted, his crystalline form pulsing with grudging respect. "They've turned their entire atmosphere into a defensive weapon." What followed would be remembered as the 6-hour war. Not because it lasted only 6 hours, but because in 6 hours humanity taught the galaxy what humans meant by asymmetric warfare. The collective's ground forces were technological marvels. Armored exoskeletons that could ignore small arms fire, energy weapons that could vaporize targets at molecular levels, and artificial intelligences that could process tactical information faster than biological minds could comprehend. They landed expecting to face primitive projectile weapons and disorganized resistance from a demoralized population. Instead, they found David Kane. The first collective patrol to reach the outskirts of Denver consisted of 12 Zephyrian warriors in powered armor, supported by hover platforms mounting energy cannons. Their sensors showed no significant military presence in the area, just scattered electromagnetic signatures that suggested civilian evacuation procedures. The patrol leader, Captain Coptin Sunthini, was reviewing target priorities when the first human appeared. "Surrender, human," Korsixthani broadcast through his armor's external speakers. "You cannot hope to resist the collective's forces." Kane stopped 20 meters away, his hands empty and relaxed at his sides. When he spoke, his voice carried the calm confidence of a man who had calculated the odds and found them acceptable. "You're right. I can't resist 12 of you." The knife appeared in his hand with a speed that the Zephyrian sensors registered but could not quite track, a blur of movement that transformed a harmless human into something far more dangerous. Kane moved like liquid death, using the aliens' technological superiority against them. Their energy weapons were too powerful for close combat. Any shot risked destroying their own forces along with their target. Their armor was designed to stop high-energy projectiles, not the surgical precision of a blade wielded by someone who had spent years learning exactly where to cut. The knife found the gaps where armor segments joined, where sensor arrays created vulnerable blind spots, where alien physiology placed vital systems close to the surface. Kane moved through the patrol like a ghost, appearing behind warriors before their processing systems could track his position, striking with clinical efficiency before vanishing into the urban wreckage that had become his hunting ground. The recording reached Admiral Krikstella 17 minutes later, transmitted by the patrol's emergency beacon before its power cells failed. She watched in horrified fascination as a single human dismantled an entire squad of warriors equipped with weapons that could crack planets. "How?" Commander Velnoth whispered, his crystalline form flickering with shades of fear. "How is this possible?" Dr. Siltani provided the answer from her research vessel, her voice carrying the tremulous notes of someone who had just witnessed something outside the natural order. "We designed our tactics around species that evolved toward harmony. Admiral, beings who seek to minimize casualties, who fight defensively, who value preservation over victory." She paused, reviewing the tactical analysis of Kane's assault. "This human doesn't fight to preserve himself or minimize casualties. He fights to kill efficiently. His entire combat methodology is designed around ending threats with maximum speed and minimum resources. One human cannot defeat our entire ground force." "No, Admiral. But there are 8 billion humans on this planet, and if even a fraction of them fight like this individual," the implications hung in the command center like a death sentence. The collective's military doctrine had been developed for conflicts between civilized species, warfare conducted according to rules, with objectives that could be achieved through demonstration of superior force. They were not prepared for a species that treated war as evolution by other means, where victory belonged to those willing to pay any price, accept any loss, endure any hardship rather than surrender. The ground assault continued for 6 hours. By the end of it, the collective had lost more warriors in a single day than in the previous 3 centuries combined. Human resistance had not collapsed under superior technology. It had adapted, improvised, and begun turning that same technology against its creators. Kane's dozen-man team had become the template for human resistance across the planet. Small units of highly trained individuals, moving through terrain they knew better than any alien scanner could map, striking without warning and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. The humans didn't try to match alien technology weapon for weapon. Instead, they used guile, cunning, and a savage creativity born from millions of years of surviving on a planet that had tried to kill them in every way possible. They turned the aliens' energy weapons against them by rigging mirrors that redirected fire into ammunition depots. They used the collective's reliance on sensors against them by creating false signatures that led armored units into carefully prepared kill zones. They exploited the aliens' psychological inability to comprehend truly ruthless tactics by doing things that no civilized species would consider, using their own wounded as bait, sacrificing entire city blocks to eliminate single high-value targets, and fighting with the kind of desperate ferocity that only came from a species that had learned survival was never guaranteed. Admiral Crixthala received the casualty reports in her command center, each number striking her crystalline consciousness like physical blows. 3,000 Zephyrian warriors dead, 1,500 Morpheus biosuits compromised, 800 Veltaxi quantum manipulators destroyed by humans using nothing more sophisticated than improvised explosives and steel blades. Admiral Commander Velna's voice carried harmonics of something the collective had not heard in centuries. Defeat. Ground forces are requesting immediate withdrawal to defensive positions. Granted. The word felt like poison in her thoughts. Crixthala gestured toward the tactical displays showing the current state of Earth's surface. What had begun as a systematic occupation had devolved into urban warfare across dozens of major cities, with human resistance fighters using the wreckage of their own civilization as weapons against their would-be conquerors. Counselor, these humans don't fight like any species in our database. They treat their own deaths as acceptable losses if it advances their strategic objectives. They sacrifice themselves to deny us resources, information, tactical advantages. They've weaponized their own extinction instinct. Impossible. No rational species. With respect, Counselor, rationality may not apply to a species that evolved on a death world where survival required absolute commitment to violence. The truth was becoming undeniable. Earth wasn't just another primitive world to be absorbed into the collective. It was something far more dangerous. A planet that had spent 4 billion years perfecting the art of killing, producing a species so thoroughly adapted to warfare that they could turn any environment, any tool, any situation into a weapon. David Kane was crouched in the ruins of what had once been downtown Denver, his combat knife cleaned and resheathed, his breathing steady despite 6 hours of continuous combat. Around him, the remains of his team checked weapons, treated wounds, and prepared for the next phase of operations. "Sitrip," Kane said quietly into his throat microphone. Kane nodded, unsurprised. The aliens were good. Their technology was centuries beyond human capability. Their warriors skilled and disciplined, but they fought like beings who had never truly faced extinction, who had never learned that sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything. Next phase, nightfall, we go hunting. The sun was setting over the ruins of human civilization, painting the sky in shades of red that seemed prophetic. Kane knew that orbital bombardment would come eventually. The aliens would realize that ground assault was too costly and simply sterilize the planet from space. But every hour they delayed, every moment they hesitated, bought humanity time to prepare for what came next. His secure communicator crackled with an encrypted transmission from General Hayes. Kane were receiving reports from resistance cells worldwide. The enemy is pulling back to fortified positions in major population centers. Confirmed. They're learning that urban warfare favors defenders who don't mind bringing down the city around them. Dr. Hartwell's team has been analyzing captured alien technology. They think they've found something. Kane felt a flicker of hope, the first he'd allowed himself since the war began. What kind of something? The kind that might level the playing field. How quickly can you get to the Colorado facility? Kane looked around at the wreckage that had been a city, at his men who had fought impossible odds and somehow lived to fight again. at a world that had refused to surrender even when surrender was the only rational choice. "Give me 12 hours. You've got 6. The transmission ended, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts in the gathering darkness. Somewhere above, alien minds were struggling to comprehend a species that treated certain death as simply another tactical consideration. Somewhere in the depths of space, a galactic civilization was learning that some worlds were too dangerous to conquer. And somewhere in the ruins of humanity's greatest cities, 8 billion people were preparing to teach the universe what it meant to fight like a human. The knife at his belt caught the reflected firelight as he moved, its steel surface gleaming with the promise of violence yet to come. In his hands, it was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of humanity's refusal to accept the inevitable, their willingness to face impossible odds with nothing more than sharpened steel and the absolute conviction that freedom was worth any price. Above, alien ships prepared for orbital bombardment, while their commanders struggled to understand how a species with stone knives and projectile weapons had managed to turn the galaxy's most advanced military into a casualty list. The answer was simple, though the collective would never truly comprehend it. Humans had never evolved to be civilized. They had learned to control their violence, to channel their aggression, to build societies that could harness the killing instinct that had carried them through millions of years of evolution on a world that rewarded only the strong. But civilization was a choice, not an instinct. And when that choice was threatened, when their freedom hung in the balance, humans could shed the veneer of peace and become what they had always been underneath: the apex predators of a death world, equipped with intelligence, tools, and an absolute refusal to quit. The collective had offered humanity a place in their galactic civilization, assuming that any rational species would choose survival over principle, comfort over freedom, harmony over the right to determine their own destiny. They had learned too late that humans were not, and had never been, rational. Dr. Hartwell was waiting in the depths of the Colorado facility when Kane arrived, surrounded by alien technology that hummed with energies that human science was only beginning to understand. "David, thank God you made it." Hartwell's face showed the strain of 6 hours that had aged him 6 years. "We found something extraordinary." Define extraordinary. "The aliens' quantum communication system. It's not just for talking between ships, it's how they coordinate their entire civilization. Every decision, every strategic choice, every tactical adjustment goes through quantum channels back to their home systems. Better, we found a way to feed them false information." The implications hit Kane like a physical blow. If humanity could convince the collective that Earth was more dangerous than it actually was, if they could make their enemies believe that conquering humanity would cost more than victory was worth, what do you need? Time. And a way to make them believe that humans are capable of things that should be impossible. "Doctor," he said quietly, "I don't think we'll need to lie." In the depths of space, Admiral Krixthalla was receiving reports that challenged everything the collective thought they knew about warfare, about civilization, about the nature of intelligent life itself. The humans were not breaking under the pressure of superior technology. They were adapting to it, learning from it, turning it against its creators with a creativity that bordered on the supernatural. More disturbing still, they were doing it while accepting casualty rates that would have broken any civilized species. Admiral Dr. Sultani's voice carried frequencies of awe and terror as her image materialized in the command center. "We need to reassess our entire approach to this species." "Explain." "The humans aren't fighting to win in any conventional sense. They're fighting to make conquest so expensive that we'll choose to leave rather than continue paying the price." Krixthalla felt her crystalline structure resonate with harmonics of understanding. "They're not trying to defeat us militarily. They're trying to defeat us economically." "Exactly. And Admiral, it's working." The truth was undeniable. Every hour of continued operations cost the collective resources that would take years to replace. Every warrior lost was a century of training and experience that could never be recovered. Every ship damaged was a technological marvel that represented the accumulated knowledge of an entire civilization. The humans, by contrast, seemed to view their losses as investments in a larger strategy. They traded lives for time, cities for tactical advantages, their entire civilization for the chance to make the collective's victory. "Signal the Council," Krixthalla ordered. "Request guidance for unprecedented scenario." "Admiral, the Council has already made their position clear. These humans must be integrated or eliminated. Then they don't understand what we're facing here, Commander. High Counselor Nix Vera's presence filled the command center with cold authority. Admiral Krix, you will proceed with full orbital bombardment. Sterilize the planet if necessary, but eliminate this threat to collective harmony. Counselor, that would mean the deaths of 8 billion sentient beings. Better 8 billion dead primitives than the spread of their infection to other worlds. Krix realized with growing horror that the Council was right to be afraid. If humanity's example spread, if other species learned that even overwhelming technological superiority could be defeated by sufficient willingness to sacrifice, it would mean the end of the collective's expansion, the collapse of their philosophy of inevitable harmony. Humanity had to be destroyed not because they were a military threat, but because they were an ideological one. Begin orbital bombardment, she ordered, her voice carrying harmonics of a funeral dirge. The weapons that could crack continents charged with energies that had been perfected over millennia of peaceful expansion. In minutes, Earth would become a lifeless rock drifting through space, its population eliminated, its dangerous example silenced forever. But David Kane had spent his entire adult life learning that the most dangerous moment in any conflict was when the enemy thought they had already won. "Doctor," he said into the secure communicator connecting him to Hartwell's quantum array, "initiate the deception protocol." "David, are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." "Do it." The quantum transmission that reached the collective fleet contained information that should have been impossible for a primitive species to possess. Detailed technical specifications for their weapon systems, tactical assessments of their fleet capabilities, and strategic plans for coordinated strikes against targets that Earth's technology shouldn't have been able to reach. The final piece of information was a tactical assessment that made Admiral Krix's crystalline consciousness ring with fear. Earth's resistance was not limited to their home planet. Human sleeper agents had already been deployed throughout collective space, hidden among the populations of dozens of member worlds, waiting for the signal to begin guerrilla operations that would turn the galaxy's most peaceful civilizations into battlegrounds. It was a lie, of course. Humanity had no sleeper agents, no hidden bases, no capability to survive sustained orbital bombardment. But the collective didn't know that, and their own paranoia filled in the gaps that human creativity had left for them to find. "Admiral," Commander Velnot's voice carried harmonics of panic as he reviewed the intercepted intelligence. "If this information is accurate, we're not facing a primitive species. We're facing a civilization that's been preparing for interstellar warfare for centuries." Krix studied the tactical projections with growing unease. If humanity could continue fighting from hidden bases, if they had agents positioned throughout collective space, if they were truly prepared to wage guerrilla warfare across the entire galaxy, the cost would be unimaginable. "Signal the Council," she ordered. "Request immediate consultation on strategic alternatives to orbital bombardment." "Admiral, surely you're not considering." "Commander, if these humans can do what this intelligence suggests, orbital bombardment won't end the war, it will only ensure that we'll be fighting it on 1,000 worlds instead of one." The Council's response came within minutes, transmitted through quantum channels that connected the fleet to the collective's highest leadership across dozens of star systems. High Counselor Nix Vera's presence blazed with fury as she materialized in the command center. "Admiral, you will proceed with the bombardment immediately. This species represents an existential threat to collective harmony." "Impossible. They're primitives with projectile weapons. Primitives who have just demonstrated detailed knowledge of our weapon systems, our fleet positions, and our strategic capabilities. Primitives who have been planning for interstellar warfare while we assumed they were incapable of leaving their own atmosphere." The silence that followed stretched across star systems as the implications sank in. If humanity had been preparing for galactic warfare, if they had sleeper agents, if they possessed technology they had kept hidden, "What are you proposing, Admiral?" Krix looked one final time at the planet below, at the blue-green world that had just taught the galaxy's greatest civilization that some species were too dangerous to conquer and too stubborn to ignore. "Withdraw, Counselor. Complete withdrawal from this system, with standing orders that no collective vessel approach within 50 light-years of Earth." You're suggesting we abandon our expansion into this sector because of a single primitive world? I'm suggesting we recognize that this world is not primitive, Counselor. It's something far more dangerous. A civilization that has spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare, while we forgot that such arts existed. The Council's debate raged across quantum space for hours while the fleet maintained its position over Earth, weapons charged but unused. Finally, High Counselor Nixvera returned with the decision that would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. Admiral Crixdela, you are authorized to withdraw from the Sol system. Earth will be classified as a restricted zone, off-limits to all collective vessels until further evaluation can be completed. And the humans? The humans will be left to their own devices. Perhaps isolation will teach them the value of civilized behavior. As the collective fleet departed Earth's solar system, their sensors recorded one final image that would haunt alien minds for generations. David Kane standing in the ruins of Denver, his combat knife gleaming in the firelight as he watched the stars reclaim their alien visitors. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of catching a knife during a power outage had cascaded into humanity's first interstellar victory. All he knew was that the ships were leaving, that Earth remained free, and that somewhere in the galaxy alien civilizations were learning a lesson that humans had known for millennia. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The knife returned to its sheath with a soft whisper of steel against leather, and David Kane walked into the dawn of humanity's first day as a recognized galactic power, not because they had proven themselves civilized, but because they had proven themselves too dangerous to conquer. In the depths of space, the Harmonious Collective began the long process of updating their databases, adding a new category to their classifications of intelligent species. Deathworlders, classification avoid at all costs. And beneath that heading, in letters that would glow with warning across alien computer systems for centuries to come, appeared a single entry. Species: human, homeworld Earth. Sol Therid. Status: do not engage. The galaxy had learned a new lesson in the mathematics of war. Sometimes the smallest weapon in the right hands could fell the mightiest empire. Sometimes all it took was a man with a knife who refused to surrender.